Hello and welcome to the Gifted Ed podcast. I'm your host, Megan McCarthy. We are grateful for the opportunity to share this space with you today as we talk about the complexities of giftedness. Today we're excited to welcome Yonty Friesem to the Gifted Ed podcast and to welcome back Luke Jacob to continue our conversation about digital wellness. Yonty is the Executive Director of the Media Education Lab and the Founding Director of the MA in Media for Social Impact at Columbia College, Chicago, as part of an effort to shape more equitable and trauma-informed practices of media and community engagement. Yonty's publications include the theory of inclusive dialogs via youth media they call digital empathy. In 2022, Yonty co-founded the Illinois Media Literacy Coalition and co-edited the Routledge Handbook of Media Education, Futures and Post-Pandemic. Yonty serves as a member in the International Global Board of UNESCO, Information and Media Literacy Alliance. We're excited to invite Yonty to continue our series on digital wellness and media literacy by breaking down the elements of empathy, the role it plays in digital wellness, and discussing strategies teachers can use in their classrooms to support student development of empathy. Luke, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deeper into our digital wellness series. So thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
Okay, so I would love to start our conversation by first defining what is empathy and kind of just how our understanding of empathy has developed over the years.
So I'm not going to go too much history, like going like 300 years ago and debates and stuff. But basically, it was called sympathy in the beginning, which then explains why is the confusion between sympathy and empathy. And basically, it's in emotion, like in Latin. And the idea is to feel like the feeling of another person. That's the very most, dictionary definition.
Okay.
Let's say.
Yep.
I have a much more inclusive, broader. That's part of the thing here that for some people who have issues with empathy, they're seeing empathy as only feeling a feeling of another person.
Okay.
And for example, there is a professor at Yale for psychology, Paul Bloom, who said that this is really not a good thing for judges to use their empathy, because if they're using their emotional judgment instead of the facts and what's in front of them, they're going to start discriminating and using their own subjectivity and biases.
Okay.
Now, that is agreeable if you look at empathy as just that, as just feeling what another person is feeling. So from my perspective, it's much more than that. It has the emotional component, which is that, but also the cognitive component, which is what educator would call theory of mind, is understanding. So that's why it's cognitive, what another person is feeling, what's happening there, predicting what they're going to do.
Okay.
And so there is the cognitive parts, there is the emotional parts, there is a somatic part, there is the mirror neurons that they found in monkeys in Italy while they were the researcher was eating nuts. And then the brain of the monkey was basically having the same stimulation as if the monkey was eating nuts, but he was just sitting there with the machine on his head.
Okay.
So they realized that there is this kind of thing that when you look at somebody that having an experience, you might be experiencing from a mindset like the same experience, although you're not. So you can think about going to a horror movie, for example, and being afraid, or you see the actor there being stabbed and you feel like some physical feeling in you. So it has, again, emotional, cognitive, somatic, and I would add to it also compassion. And that's, again, part that not everybody agree.
Okay.
Again, for me, it's all together. And so when I'm talking about digital empathy, which we'll get to that, it's combining all of those together. It's not just the emotion. It's not just the cognitive. It's not just the somatic. It's and the compassion. It's all of it together.
Okay.
Because each one separately can be called with those names that they are. And again, there's other scholars who are even dividing it into more like role-playing.
Yes.
And projecting. And really, that's kind of an academic kind of game of how can we dissect and theorize and find different elements. But in general, if you would stop me in the street or 2 a.m. in the morning, what is empathy? I would say is the cognitive, emotional, somatic, and compassionate response to somebody else's state of mind, action, and emotions.
So I can think, and again, one is not better than the other. They're all different, but I would want, if I'm upset and I call my sister, I don't want theory of mind. I want her to be in it with me and feeling it with me, for example. Potentially, like if I want that emotional.
That's the compassionate part.
Oh,
like,
that's okay.
That you want somebody to listen.
Yes.
Because if she would be 100% like empathic with the emotion, she would become obsessed. You don't want that. You want her to actually.
Yes.
So you want her to have the understanding of the state you're in.
Yep.
To feel what you're feeling up to a certain point,
right.
But to be supportive, understanding what you actually need right now.
True.
To be supportive. So a lot of people say this is way beyond the empathy area. It's much more than that.
Yep.
I do see all of that and put it in one specific word, but it's a very debatable kind of concept with a lot of different people deciding it's different things.
Well, and I don't want my doctor feeling what I'm feeling, right? Like I don't want that, but I want them to fully understand as much as possible. But I do see, which is a separation that I try and make with students as a social worker working with students, that sometimes students will come to me very, especially with gifted, right, emotional intensities, they will be feeling the conflict of other peers, or they are very moved by a novel, right, and certain characters where they are truly feeling deeply, and it is as though it is happening to them there too. So that's an interesting facet. Is, you know, we talk about its connection to giftedness too, but how some students lean into that very quickly.
If you want to get just a tiny bit, because that's something that took me several years to not figure out, me as a researcher, but to figure out the conceptual and reading enough that, and from a psychology therapy, it's known, as you said, that your doctor, but also your therapist, when you're coming to your therapist, you don't want them to start crying with you.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So there is a difference between identifying totally and being taken over, then to really be empathic, again, the way that I describe it, which means that I understand in my mind what you're going through, but in the feeling, I'm putting some kind of barrier because I know what you also need and what I need and who I am and who you are, and kind of being able to do this kind of, so that's where the compassion, the cognitive, the emotion, and it's not that you can put, that's why I'm saying it's all empathy.
It's hard, it's
very, very hard,
right?
And I don't know anybody, maybe I didn't meet enough people, but that is 100% that.
No, right.
It's very, very difficult.
Yes.
But if we can thrive towards that kind of thing, that would be great in education. And gifted students have their own challenges in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, this is my 18th year working in schools and as a licensed clinical therapist and a social worker. And I mean, those are things that you learn through grad school and then in supervision and intensive, as a therapist, right? Like how to not take on and feel, just being aware of those boundaries. And so the fact that students sometimes have those feelings and just the self-awareness that's required. I mean, that's very complex for everything that our kids are feeling.
Yes.
And then I think you touched on too, just the idea of empathy as a spectrum too. And just...
So there is a very controversial research from Simon Baron-Cohen, who is the head of the Research Center for Autism at Cambridge University. And he theorized in 2010, 2011, that empathy is an interesting spectrum, different than the autism spectrum, but that goes from one end, which is high emotional empathy and low on cognitive empathy. The middle one is both of them are kind of similar. And then the other end, which is high on cognitive empathy and low on emotional empathy. And that scale from a theory perspective, okay, fine, you can do whatever you want with statistics.
Sure.
But the controversial part was that he put people on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, on one end, saying that they have a high emotional empathy and a low cognitive empathy.
Okay.
I'll explain it in a second.
Yeah.
And just to explain, the controversial part is on the other side, he put sociopath.
Okay.
So just to think about having a kid who is on the spectrum, and you're telling me that he's on one end between sociopath and my kid, would be quite upset
yes.
of like, so that's a controversial part. Now, the logic of what he was trying to say, and kind of I'm dumbing it down. It's much more complicated than this. But the general thing was that from his experience working with people on the spectrum, emotionally, they're like sponges and getting a lot of things that activate them emotionally.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult for them to verbalize what happened and how, or to really understand, or sometimes to make a rationale for why somebody behaving in a way, it's kind of unclear for them why this person behaved that way, but it hurts. It activates different feelings.
Okay.
So from his perspective, he says they're emotionally very, very sensitive. They have very high, they understand even on the kind of energy level of somebody.
Yep.
But the rationalizing and explaining and kind of making sense of these emotions, that's where there is some lacking or some kind of a barrier that it's not that developed. That's what he said about that.
Sure.
And then on the completely other side of the spectrum, putting sociopaths, is that he's saying they are very, very high in their cognitive. They totally understand what the person is feeling. They can predict and everything. Think about bullying and stuff. But the emotion is not there. They have zero emotion. So they can hurt somebody really bad because they know it's going to hurt them, but it doesn't activate their feelings. So they can keep doing it and it's not activating their kind of thing. So, but again, comparing those two apple and oranges created a huge controversy and issues about what is going on here, and showing that that's not true with people on the spectrum who can have a very high theory of mind and still have issues with relationships. So there were some issues there, but the basic of this kind of thing was the fact that he explained that there are different levels of empathy.
Yes.
And so there are different scales. So he made it in an extreme kind of showcase thing, but his main research was how people can be evil. Like that was kind of the thing. And the explanation was that they're not emotionally activated by it. They totally understand what they're doing and why they're doing. And with what we're living right now, with a lot of different things that are happening in our country and in our world, there's so much violence, so much atrocity that are happening. And you're thinking like, this is a human being. How can they do such a thing? So it explains that there's no emotional attachment there. There's no emotional empathy. There's a very cognitive understanding of how to get to what you want to get.
Okay.
And that creates this kind of, I saying we, the royal we, but I, for myself, I don't want my kids or my students or people I'm encountering with to have a deficit in either of those types of empathy.
Yeah.
So from the scale kind of thing, I'm working toward finding some kind of a middle ground where if you have some kind of deficit on one, so to work on that.
Okay.
And reach some kind of a balance so that you can really, the most social and people who are really thriving in this world are people who are able to work on both.
Yeah. And so is it fair to like having a balance between, for example, if we just use the, I forgot what word you called it, but like the feeling empathy and the cognitive empathy, if we have a balance, and I know there's the somatic, but even just a balance, striving for a balance between those two gives reason and logic to the emotions.
Right.
Just to understand it in both, I guess, capacities.
And give the compassion to balance the cognitive to just go on rational and also understand that there's emotional things involved, right?
Yeah.
That's the other part.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, when you get like somebody who was accused of being a bully to other kids, right? So one of the things as remedial or kind of work through it is to have them really understand what is the impact of what they did, not just with, it was funny because he fell from the chair or something, but the person felt ashamed, the person kind of felt like, and when sometimes the bully is able to take that in, they're kind of suddenly they feel like, oh, that's not what I wanted. I thought it would be funny. I
Right.
thought it was, and then suddenly realizing, oh no, I hurt those feelings, and the other person felt this feeling that I don't like either.
Right.
So that's where the empathy is helpful to kind of
that.
work on that and enhance that.
Okay. Just thinking through, right? Just different
Yeah.
students or different, I guess, examples, that we've seen over time. And I know, well, I'm trying to think of the students that, or not even students necessarily, but there'll be, studies and data that shows kids who sometimes hurt kids are hurt themselves, right? They have that experience of it. And this is a situation that they can control. And I'm trying to think how empathy would play a role in that.
There is a weird concept called self-empathy. And so it's kind of weird because empathy is all about you versus the other.
Yeah.
So how do you do a self on yourself? But the idea is, yes, to be also compassionate with yourself. So if we're talking about kids on Instagram that are looking at how everybody looks amazing, every day is the best day of their life, and like to understand that they can celebrate themselves also, and finding the ways and what to tell to themselves in a way that will be really, affirmation, like positive affirmation for themselves. So there is, Christine Neff is a big on self-compassion.
Okay.
She's like world expert and really working on that. And it's really connected with the self-empathy part.
And I don't think I've heard, or I've thought of empathy towards, I guess I've always thought about it in connection to someone else.
That's the original
That is the
term,
original,
but
right.
it's been,
But,
more academics, more research, more different terms to make it more complicated.
Yeah. But the idea of self-empathy in connection to compassion,
and
too.
that goes back to what we were saying also, is that if you also, as a therapist, for example, if you feel that you're flooded with emotion that has been activated by the students, like you learn to have mechanism and stuff to also take care of yourself while you're taking care of the other student who is here. So that's part of this self-empathy that needs to come in this combination as well.
Yeah. And would be incredibly powerful with kids, especially adolescents, right? Okay, so you also had mentioned how sympathy and empathy are confused, or empathy kind of started in sympathy.
Yes.
And has developed on its own. Can you kind of talk us through the
So again, I'm not going to go to David Hume and like how, like scholars were looking at. But so what happened is because the term started as sympathy.
Yep.
And it was talking only about the emotional connection. And then empathy started to have like more kind of it started with a German term, which I cannot pronounce it, but it was in emotions. And then it was translated into English from those written philosophies as empathy, and then started to be those two terms, sympathy and empathy. And really in the last 30 years, you can see more scholars that are making a very specific distinction between the two. The most viral video is Brené Brown from her first TED talk that she did that has been taken by the Royal Animation something, and they created this animation with those animals and stuff.
Yep.
So that's kind of but it's really summarized really well the difference. So the difference basically is that empathy is at the eye level. Like I feel the emotion with you when I'm looking into your eyes. I'm feeling what you're feeling. There is some kind of emotional energy that is kind of going between us.
Okay.
Sympathy is when you come to somebody and you see that they're in some kind of a stress, and you give a hand on their shoulder while you're standing and they're sitting. So there is some patronizing in it.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be negative. Like if somebody is in grief, so that's acceptable. You come and you give your condolences.
Sure.
You're not grieving at the same level. You're not going to say, it was your family member. It's not my family member.
Right.
I'm not going to start crying like crazy. So I'm giving my sympathy. It's an honorable thing to do. It's very polite, and that's accepted. But when we're talking about the playground, for example, and a kid got hurt, if the teacher come from a sympathy perspective, which is I'm the adult, don't worry, just, okay, you're crying, that's not going to be really taken very well by the kid.
Yeah.
because it's very patronizing. The kids, if they don't know to verbalize it, they would feel the patronizing, and the reaction would be much worse. Either they will cry more, or they will hit, or they will run away, but there's going to be some counter. But if the person comes and sit or getting into their level and saying, this is really hard.
Yeah.
I see what you're going through. Not saying that you feel the same feeling, because you don't, but to say this is really hard, and you empathizing with the difficulties and stuff, there's going to be much more connection and openness than the sympathy kind of patronizing. So that's kind of really giving the context of the school for the difference between sympathy and empathy.
So as I'm thinking through and just working with different families over all the years, not just here, but in other settings too, and having my own kids, but sometimes I will often hear, and it's not just the kids say, my parents just don't understand me, right? How many times we've all heard that at some point, or been the one who said my parents do not understand me. We're correct.
Right.
But what I'm wondering is and this is obviously making it too simplistic, but just go with me here, is part of it. And what I hear with students when I push that more, what I'm wondering is if the students or the children, the kids, adolescents are in pain, suffering from some sadness, some anxiety, some worry, some whatever. And the adult does the sympathy, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, or tries to make it about them. I have felt this way before, without going to the empathy first, without going to the, I'm here with you. You don't have to tell me what's going on, but I'm seeing you, I'm acknowledging you, going from the empathy standpoint first versus the sympathy, which sometimes doesn't go over. It doesn't land the way I think no one trying to be sympathetic, they don't want it to land poorly. I don't think that's their intention. I'm wondering if this is part of the...
this is based on Dr. Becky Kennedy and all the research about the whole brain child, which, again, those are empathy researchers.
Yeah.
And they're talking about empathy. And so this is kind of, now as parenting, it's really easy for me to say it. But as a parent myself,
I know.
I'm not even talking about the practice at home.
Right.
So here we're going to go. I'm not going to try to give parenting advice.
Yeah.
I have my own podcast about media daddies with my colleagues from Brazil who were saying that we're the expert by day and clueless parents by night.
Right.
So it's a very humoristic kind of podcast talking about how it's difficult to be parents, but we can tell the whole world how to act and what to do.
Sure.
So here I'm going to more focus on the educator.
Yeah.
So because the educator, there is some distance that gives you that perspective that is easier to play there.
Yep.
Parents, you're so connected emotionally and you're so much time with your kid that a lot of triggers and stuff, and it's a whole different environment. So from an educator point of view, yes. I mean, the empathic would be a much better way to address. And I'm sure when you have, workshop with the teachers here and working, that's kind of trying, which is sometimes difficult because everybody is a human being and with emotions.
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something that happens. But if we would at least aim toward that, to be empathic, to look in the eye, to catch ourselves when we're trying to be more patronizing and to use our power as adults or educator to stop for a second and kind of, reroute.
Yeah.
That would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think that you've used the term power there at the end. And I think that when working with young people, there are power dynamics among the kids themselves, of course. And I think about a classroom experience I had with 13 and 14-year-olds over the course of 2 or 3 years in a course that fell into a wellness department in a school where one of the topics was empathy and sympathy. And luckily, Brene Brown had just had her TED Talk turned into that cartoon, which was lovely for kicking off conversations. But I did find that educators working with young people, if we can give them opportunities to look at case studies, scenarios, they don't always love role playing, let's be honest. Some kids really love role playing, some do not. Many young people are fine with being given a scenario with some detail and some character names, and then debating, talking through, or even thinking about putting themselves into the scenario. Really, they get sophisticated very quickly about the power dynamics involved in, well, what would it mean to take this person's side? Say there's someone being treated badly. how do I empathize with that person in an active way that's useful?
Yeah.
And, Yonty, you began this whole conversation by mentioning that empathy is complicated. There's more than one dynamic. And even if you just said cognitive, emotional, and somatic, for example, if you just said those three things, most of the 13 and 14-year-olds I saw weren't jumping to those three terms in that way. And yet they were jumping to those three concepts super fast. They were finding somatic and cognitive and emotional levels and debating with each other. And the teacher can, at that point, say, there's names for these things.
Yeah.
And there's a concept of a spectrum of, you could be this on this side, you could be on this side, you could be kind of trying to meet in the middle. And it's amazing how quickly young people who are having these experiences constantly, especially in their online lives, which is part of what we're talking about here, start to say, well, yeah, okay, here's something. They'll often say, here's something I experienced. And they'll tell that story, whether they were the person who felt harmed or whether they were the person who felt did some harm, because they know everyone's having these experiences. And just a little bit of using classroom time for tangible examples of in-person interactions or in digital interactions. Here are some things that happen. Here are some real cases. Students start to bring their own cases to the table. And very quickly, these ideas that Yonty's been defining start to arise naturally, and they need terminology to help them talk through it. And they need the guidance and the shape that the adult can provide of, okay, let's talk through what this means, what you've experienced, and what do you think for the future? What are some techniques? What are some strategies we can employ? It's amazing how quickly the students dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and they come back to you and say, I've been looking into the history of empathy. They might come back and say, I just learned about this guy named Hume from 300 years. It's amazing because they know instinctively that these are things they've been experiencing their whole lives. And they're realizing, I'm a preteen or a teen. I'm now in these arenas where I'm figuring out who I am and who I want to be. And often those two things aren't the same yet.
Right.
And this is a very powerful tool. Overt education about sympathy and empathy can really help young people make strides that they're very proud of very quickly.
And how I want to make other people feel
how I want to make other people feel, how I want other people to understand, to help me feel.
Yeah.
Right?
And with that empowerment piece too, where if we just think of empathy from just the emotional part of it, and if that's something that you struggle with, but you really feel the cognitive piece, I can see how if it's just looked at from the emotional piece, and if that's not something that's comes as easy to you, it feels very shameful. Where if there's also a layers of the cognitive piece or the compassionate piece or the somatic piece, and you can maybe latch onto those a little bit more easily, it's okay, you can still have the conversation and then figure out where to balance it out versus completely feeling like this is just not natural to you, that's hard.
I mean, even babies, I read a book lately about our habits of eating. And the author, which I don't remember now, was talking about how babies are anthropologists when they're throwing the spoon on the floor, and then the parent is doing, then bending and taking the spoon and putting back. And then if they do it again, the parent is doing the same thing again. So they have the power to do that, and they're doing it millions of times. Because they're activating like it's a fun thing. Here, I press the button and it does this performance in front of me. So obviously the kids who are coming to the school don't have the vocabulary, but they do know, as Luke, you were saying, they know those things, but they need to kind of be explained what it is, put it into concept so that it helps them understand, especially when we're talking about adolescents, their identity and exploring their identity, how to do it. And now with online places, like how to explore your identity in a way that will be safe for you and for the people around you. But really, because we're talking about gifted kids, there is some tiny differences there as well from, I don't know if to say regular kids, but especially because of their self-esteem of their knowledge on one hand. But then a lot of the time it comes with some discrepancy with their emotional development.
That asynchronous development.
And that goes back to, again, cognitive, emotional, somatic, like, is all of those things are working together or not?
Right.
And that's also with the empathy, the same thing.
Yeah. So if cognitively the skill set is in the gifted realm, but emotionally it is in the neurotypical realm, if you will. But then within the emotion piece, you have the empathy, the different levels within the empathy. That generally is, that is the struggle of a lot of the students that I work with here, is just the not playing catch up, but just that constant understanding and revisiting of what feels natural, what comes easily, what doesn't, and then the anxiety within that, because some things come very natural to me. And then when we hit struggle for the first time, in a different area. So now if we open to this or kind of walk into the digital space of this, and we're talking about empathy, just how does the emotional intelligence intersect with digital wellness within the digital space?
So, being at the end of the day a media literacy teacher in my bones, the first thing to go is to talk about all those gifted high-tech people who created amazing tools that 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't even imagine that this is even impossible. And all the futuristic, writing, nobody talked about social media. AI maybe in a way, but not exactly. And we can see that, Bill Gates is talking about his issues with social interaction. Elon Musk saying he's an Asperger. And, so all of those people, very gifted, did amazing tools. However, and this is just an assumption. I have some evidence to base it, but it's not like I did research about it. Their emotional connection with their impact was not exactly in place. So in something that we called social networks that were supposed to connect us, did connect us on one level, but really polarize us on another level, because those online places that we are, and that's the media literacy part, is based on profit. And so when we're coming to talk about empathy and trying to talk about all, we need to remember that at the core, all those social media have one purpose, which is to make money. If it's by taking our data, recording our interaction, like having us act upon something or to persuade us to do. So there's different ways, and it's very, there is a plethora of different ways that they're doing that. But it's very difficult to be empathic in a platform that has been designed not to be empathic. So that needs to be the first step to understanding the discussion, because if you try to be empathic on a Facebook post, and Facebook is for the old people.
I know,
So I'm not, I should talk about TikTok and Instagram, but it's the same basically. If you try to be empathic, first of all, your message might not get a lot of rating because it's not emotionally outrageous. Those are getting the highest the algorithm is looking for that.
Okay.
So, or you might get some weird reaction to that of like, what the heck are you doing on this platform that's not like, either on one way you yelling or you showing cute photos of cats.
Yes.
But if you do something weird like being empathic, like so many people that I've seen now, if we're talking about the war and the violence that has been happening, people are trying to be empathic and to understand, but they're being bashed.
Sure.
How dare you talk about whatever, and you can put whatever population community that you want, while there is others, or we are blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So that's why the media literacy part is so crucial.
Yeah.
Because if you come just with the therapeutic empathy, kind of kumbaya, and this platform are not for that.
Yeah, no.
So that's part of where the cognitive empathy and the compassion needs to understand that those platforms are working against you.
Okay.
And so what are you doing
like just sitting
to
with that
try to work on that? But that's how it is.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I mean, I think we've all seen any post showing empathy. I'm trying to think through empathy and sympathy for one cause immediately gets, well, what about if you show empathy for cause A, it's immediately assumed you don't care for B through Z.
Exactly.
Right. Which is kind of that point. But it also, yes, it's about profit. But I think at surface or when it all started, it was to connect.
No, it was profit from the beginning.
Profit from the beginning. But I think what we were sold.
Yes, so that's what is the premise, and that many people have said it already, that the premise of social media of connecting have failed.
Yeah.
And there's different people who are trying to find alternative ways, but so far it hasn't been really that successful as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
Right. So then when you talk about in emotional intelligence, how does that, I guess, high emotional intelligence or low, like how are those skills needed to navigate some of the spaces?
So in a way, it's connected the social intelligence with the emotional intelligence, with the financial intelligence or the media literacy skills. They all need to work together because I'm not talking about a class environment that you're sitting in front of, and then you can say that the students have less social intelligence because they're bullying the other kid and they're seeing the face of the other kid and it doesn't register as they hurt that kid. We're not talking about that because that's not easy.
Right.
But that's very straightforward.
Yeah.
You're in the same room with the same people kind of together and you see the impact right
there. Yeah.
But when you're using media, it's mediated communication. It's not face-to-face communication. And the mediation creates different things in the online environment. So there is the asynchronicity of like, I can write this horrible post, post it, and I'm going to bed.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm waking up in the morning to like, whoa, like what this happened. But I'm like, it's kind of disconnected from my immediate action that I did.
Yeah.
There is the anonymity, which is also something that I can write whatever because they don't know who I am. And I can put whatever name I want and whoever identity I want and kind of say. And there's not enough being ruling with accountability when somebody is doing, there is here and there.
Yeah.
But defamation kind of lawsuits.
Yep.
But it didn't trickle down to like understanding that when you write something, it has consequences.
Yeah.
So all of those are creating this arena that it's not very empathic. It's very self-promoting.
Yeah.
Of like what I feel now, and maybe what I feel now will hurt somebody else.
Right.
Now, some people tell me when I say that, okay, so basically it's like, don't post anything because whatever you're going to post, you're going to hurt somebody or so it's better just not to post anything.
Yeah.
I'm saying maybe it's not far from the truth.
Yeah.
Because if people would a little bit more filter
Yeah.
what they're doing or how they're doing it, or if we're going to sharing misinformation, most of the stuff, by the way, are by old people on Facebook. So it's really nice to say the kids don't know misinformation, but they usually know much better than their grandparents or their parents. So I'm activated by a post that is outrageous. I see, something that really activates me. I have tons of examples that I'm not going to say because they're too visual
Too
and
much.
kind of, and we know those. We encounter those that either you stay on this post or you scroll and kind of, no, I don't want to see that kind of post. But those posts are activating so much that somebody's, I need to share it. They need to see instead of pausing.
Stop and think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not stopping because you don't have to stop. You just even pausing for several seconds will do the trick of just breathing.
Yeah.
Like just really thinking like, is that even true?
Yeah.
Because you're so activated and your lizard mind is kind of taking over in kind of like, this is outrageous. It cannot be, like, people need to know about this.
We were just talking in the previous episode about the power of the pause.
Yep.
And the fact that the manage, we got into talking a little bit about managing what we're feeling, what we're responding to after the pause. And today you've been talking a lot about how you have to be able to analyze the media literacy part of things. And that pause is so powerful to let you do these other things. And the third part of that framework beyond manage and analyze is participate. And as Yonty's describing, the participation it's what you encounter, but it's also what you put out there, right? It's both sides. I was in a meeting literally yesterday with a middle school teacher, specifically a 7th grade teacher, and a campus level administrator in a school in another state in the United States, who are working on these issues in their school and what to do with formal education. And it was in this idea of social media education falling into you pause, and then maybe you manage things and you analyze things and you think about the participation. It was the participation part of really thinking that oh, it seems like when I'm in an online space that maybe sometimes I'm just there myself. I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm watching TikTok reels. And it's just me doing that.
Yeah.
It's very easy not to realize, well, no, that's still a participatory act.
Yeah.
You're still in a social, by definition, environment with other people, but it's very easy for it to feel like a thing that's just me.
Just you, yeah.
And that maybe I'm not affected, or even if I am, it's just me, and maybe I'm not affecting anyone else. But everything that you like reinforces the thing that you've liked. And I'm talking about like, not just
The
like
like,
but I mean actually like clicking,
like
clicking
button.
like the
Yeah.
button, right?
Well, it's much more sophisticated now. It's not even the like.
It's just looking
the
at it.
duration that you're
How long you're
staying
there,
on
right.
it. That also, you don't need even to like. If you stay on it for the full video versus... So YouTube is using the algorithm, how long people are staying.
On something.
If they're staying longer, they're more advertising it. If they're staying shorter, they're less advertising it.
And exactly. And so helping young people understand that these are all participatory acts, that you can't be in a social media space in isolation. Again, it can be very empowering.
Sure.
It can be a little disconcerting at first. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's very powerful. Because again, this conversation, that wasn't where we started, but much of our conversation was just about that topic. How do we help students understand that in these social media spaces, you are always, through the algorithms, interacting with often millions or even tens of millions of other people that you'll never meet because it's all a big web. And I mean, I'm sorry about the pun there, but it's really true. And that's fundamentally different than the way we talked about a lot of social education for people as recently as 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and just the intricacies of in-person communication with tone of voice, with face, what our faces look like when we're saying certain things. I mean, all of those are still concepts that adults are still working through, right? And so now constantly bringing that in talking through it with students, whether middle school, lower school, high school, but then adding in this layer of, like you said, the anonymity piece to it, or if you think it's just you, or even if you put something out that is even if it is as simple as cats, right? But then you're still going to get responses if your page is public or what you're doing is public. You're still getting responses that are uncalled for, that have nothing to, nothing to do with what you put out there. But depending on where you are in your ability to kind of separate and add some logic and cognitive, piece to it, that is still going to impact the self-esteem, the wellness of anyone, but let alone children too.
If you want to make it more complicated, which I'm
Sure.
sure you do, is that our perception is that there is our face-to-face, there's our real life, and there's our digital life. That's not the way that the students are seeing their life. There's no difference.
There's no difference.
It's part of and it's very difficult for us to understand that. And I'm not sure we do understand that fully.
No.
It's very hard to empathize with that for those of us who began with there being a distinction.
Yeah.
Because we maintain the distinction.
Yeah, you could turn off the TV or the radio, but...
And just as we happily turn off our social, I mean, we we
not
certainly
so
are
much.
capable.
Yeah.
And we're capable of it, and we know the difference.
But okay, so I'm going back to that. Just a slow processor today. That there's no difference between their real life and their digital life because what they put out...
It's their whole life. So the problem for schools is that something happened in the afternoon or in the evening on social media. And the next morning, you have half of the class activated something and there's no clue what happened.
Okay.
And until
I've done that
somebody...
many times. That's been my morning many a time. Yes.
But that's the way that for the students, there's no differentiation. It's like something that happened. It's this person that sat next to me, but then in the evening we're texting. It's like as if we're like continuing. That's like how we're... But for us, as, growing up and seeing the distinction with this communication, it's this, as if there are differences. But for the students, there's no difference. Again, not everybody, I'm generalizing, but most of the students who have access to social media, who have access to mobile devices, they're like coming back home, even if the school has a ban on devices.
Yeah.
They're coming home and they're interacting with. And if your kid doesn't have, but his friend has, there's like ways to kind of try and they're going over. And so there's so many things that the educators, the parents are not aware. I'm not trying to alarm. It's just what's happening.
Yeah.
And so that creates also this discrepancy between what the kid is feeling and what the adults are trying to address, or not understanding the full context of what's happening.
And I think that's where I was going with context, because I can recall, in the beginning years, working through a conflict, or conflict resolution with 2 7th graders, and realizing this started at the park the night before, and there were 3 other kids there. Okay, let's get those 3 other kids. 5 of us, let's figure this out, because it's impacting now the school day. Well, now there was one chat room that the whole class was involved in, that then morphed into another chat room that was public, and I don't even know if they were children, if they live in the United States. I have no idea. I mean, now trying to understand the context to empathize and to try and understand and come to some sort of conflict, resolution. Yeah.
I was 2 weeks ago at a school in another state, and I usually do that, and the teachers are always shocked by it as parents, not so much as educators. But I'm asking how many of the students, those are high schoolers, have 2 separate accounts. Their public-facing account that their parents can follow them and stuff.
Yep.
And the other account with their friends where they can do all their shenanigans and whatever. And they're being honest.
Yeah.
More than half of the students. And so the teacher was also a parent, was shocked. Like, what? You don't have only one account?
Yeah.
And so that makes it, again, complicated in tracking, and there is shame and guilt, and they're not going to share it like with different people to know, because they don't want their parents to know that they have the other account that is only shared with their friends, that they can do whatever they want there. So the digital arena is really, really, really complicated in that sense.
And I'm even going back, I think take the digital part of it, or not digital part of it out, but there's at times when you're just like, why am I so exhausted? And it's like, well, because there's the email communication that you have to respond to, and then there's the text message response that you have to respond to, and then the phone call, the voicemail, like all the different versions or modes of constantly having to check, be on, make sure the daycare's not calling you, school's not, those pieces. But then bring that in the context of digital platforms that the students have to want to choose to maintain, just to feel like they're still in it, because that's important, right? To feel relevant and to feel.
I mean, that's the main thing, connection. That's why they're there.
Yes.
And so if all the class is on TikTok, but then the lead student is suddenly going on Instagram, then they're on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram. I need to be on Instagram.
Right.
So all of that,
just
of like the threat of missing out. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so 2013, Douglas Rushkoff, who coined viral media many years before that, explained that we are in a state of present shock, because it goes back to the design of the platform. We're all the time are being, I don't know if manipulated, but the design of those platforms, yes, it is. It's designed so that we're all the time there. We all the time need to click. We all the time need to like. We all the time need to respond. We all the time, I remember I was tiny that, I would go to a theater and there would be maybe one doctor that had those beepers that they needed for like whatever they needed to go. But now you go and everybody's phone is like, even if it's not ringing in a show, you have people looking at their text messages, like, enjoy the show. Why are you looking at your messages?
Yeah.
But it's part of this kind of excessive use, maybe addiction, maybe not. That's debatable, like if we call it, how we call it. But it's designed that way. And the kids who are developing their brain and trying to understand their place in the world and their socialization are being put in this pressure of this thing, and that creates a lot of issues.
And these tools exist they're so ubiquitous in arenas of life that we're not even conscious of. Again, this is 2 weeks ago, a conversation with parents of students in grades. In this case, I think these parents had people ranging from grade 4 to grade 9. And They were talking about the fact that as parents, when they're trying to think about modeling how you interact with digital media, they realize that they literally can't keep up with their children's sports teams if they don't do so via Instagram.
Oh, yes.
That they can't keep up with a dance troupe or with some sort of community entity that's really important to their family through a church or youth group or a local community organization without using whichever social medium or media those particular organizations use. And the parents were saying, this complicates things a great deal because it's not, I don't get to say I'd rather communicate in some other way. It's all through these social media to do the, and the child sees that and understands intellectually the distinction between, well, yes, you literally have to do that or you can't know what's going on. But just that intellectual distinction, you're still seeing that your parent has to walk around with a phone to know where you are at a certain point in the day. That's got to be a very powerful message that our young people are receiving as they watch the adults in their lives, even who try not to be looking at a screen, saying, well, I would pick you up at the wrong park if I didn't look at the screen.
I just want to put in parentheses, where we're landing here with the discussion is that there are different legislation because this is really getting into media regulation. Because there are different states and different countries who are working on changing the way that the platform are designed. Okay. So there's not doom scrolling, that your scrolling will stop at some point. And then you need to kind of actively ask it to continue. So it doesn't have this addictive kind of continuation.
Are you still there kind of a
exactly
message?
So the idea would be that if I need to see my daughter band on Instagram, that's what I would see and that's it. But the way it's designed now is addictive and continuing, and suddenly there is the uncle who sends something and the student who sends something, and it's becoming this monstrous kind of engagement that you need to be on it. So this is really where there is this triangle that I'm always explaining, that media literacy by itself is not the solution. Media regulation by itself is not the solution. Education and self, practice is not. They need to work together, those three. And so just put that in the context of what we're talking about. It's not that the parents are in charge and they need to do the work. Right. The kids need to just toughen up and kind of learn, or banning all the phones, or it needs all of us holistic to work on it. And that's where there's a lot of cracks. And that's where the problem is, that there's not really a collective approach to address that. Yeah. It's fragmented and it's been used to kind of polarize and to keep having the, the income for the social media platform.
And I'd say that's true, right, of any initiative. I mean, you need that braid between the school, the family, the students. It's just always balanced because you can't ban this, right? This is just where we're going.
You can, and I'm not against or for banning. What I'm saying is it's not realistic to think that if you ban social media from age 16 and below, that first of all, they won't find ways to hack. Australia is with a lot of issues trying to see how this mandate in Australia works.
It's going to work,
they can't figure that out. But the kids will have their digital life some way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important to have times of digital detox, and especially in school, to learn how to write with your hand, to have times to focus and all of that. But you need to acknowledge that the kids are living also in a digital life, and how there is a holistic approach to address that.
So if we are talking through, I guess, within the classroom and strategies, what are some ways or what are some strategies teachers can support within the development of empathy, just so that our students are kind of better equipped to be in these spaces?
So as Luke mentioned, half of the students will hate it, but role-playing. I'm one that hates role-playing. But
I like that too.
But it is helpful to mimic examples in person that would happen online, and to bridge the thing that is mediated, so you don't see the impact of what you're doing when you actually see the role-play and see that, when I'm writing this, I can go to sleep, but actually I hurt somebody. And that was the reaction.
Okay.
Or so having those situations play out is very helpful in the class, and to have time. But of course, math and English are more important. So there's not so much of social, and in social studies, we learning about history and about civics, but also in civics, there is a lot of emphasis on voting and the structure of our government, but community engagement, civic engagement, social responsibility online, there is a lot about digital citizenship that is coming, but still there needs to be more about really case studies, showing case studies, talking about it, having a discussion with them, like giving them a case without the solution and brainstorming what the solution and seeing, but it needs to be done face-to-face in the classroom to kind of give them the experience of the face-to-face communication to bridge the fact that the mediated communication doesn't have that.
I think to follow up with Yonty on what Yonty's saying in two ways, that because, of course, we have structures of education and there are departments of mathematics and English and science. So there are the structures that already exist. One really powerful thing educators can do is find ways to work within that structure to increase the amount of instruction being done in this way. I've been in schools 30 years, as you know, and so one can take something like a social medium and import it into a classroom in what I would call a gimmicky way and say, I'm going to have Hamlet, Laertes, and Ophelia, in an Instagram exchange. And really all you've done is imported the gimmick of Instagram into your discussion of Shakespeare, and you haven't really done anything there. On the other hand, you can actually take something like literature or history and have a mechanism like an imaginary social medium be a very powerful way of imagining historical figures, characters, people, if you set it up in a way that's very careful to make sure you're really getting at what you're trying to get. You can do those things. And I think equally importantly, very young people, Yonty, you mentioned writing by hand, which is funny. To be a media literate person, it helps to do things that are not digital media. You can, with very young students, begin to do overt instruction in things like body language, eye contact. I mean, I'm sure there are educators listening to this who do these things. Yeah. Because if you've got young people beginning to understand, and that it lends itself to role playing of different kinds, this is body language, this is what eye contact is, this is how people interact face to face, and you do that intentionally in the classroom, it makes it much easier as people get older to start saying, well, how does that change when you get into a digital space? A lot of this is analog education that impacts the digital world. It doesn't all have to be digital education, if that makes sense.
Yes.
To really be powerful in digital experiences.
And I think even just bringing the value to all the nonverbal communication and realizing the value that it has, that it's not just the words, but it's the tone. And kids will, I think, like you said, you told a story with babies, 2-year-olds, my 2-year-old, well, now she's 3, but can pick up on my tone. And if I can say the same sentence 2 different ways, and she right away is, "Are you frustrated?" They get everything. Nothing gets by children. So even just the tone of voice, I mean, bringing awareness to the value that all of that plays, all of those extra pieces play within communication. Hopefully, maybe, ideally, will then, when they see the absence of that in digital spaces, realize that there is something missing. There's more to the story. There's more to the context. But that is powerful. And I think role play, is always painful. But when you can bring some, laughter to it or some comedy to it, it can be a very powerful.
But it is training the mind, the body, the emotions, to those situations in I don't know, safe space, but in a space that you can experiment.
Yes.
And then you're more trained when you're going to be by yourself on your device, on your computer, to kind of remember. Your body will remember kind of that experience and look at it from the positive impact.
And I like role play when it allows people to, like you said, kind of experiment with personal things without having to own anything or share anything that's theirs, right? You can kind of approach it from a different point, but then it can bring a lot of social media, can be depersonalized, which is why you can say the anonymous comments that are awful, right? Because they can stand behind the anonymous wall, but that brings in that element of personalization, because you do see that you can picture a human reading that versus just putting it out there with no one catching it. But there is a lot here that that is still spinning around in my head. And I know this is just surface in some ways too. I know there's great depth to a lot of what you brought to us, and I'm very grateful for this conversation and for the time and energy and expertise and just space that you gave us to kind of explore this a bit more. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very, very much.
Thanks as always for this whole series. It's been great.
Yeah. I'm excited to kind of see where we continue with this, but I'm very grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
We want to thank you today for joining us in this space. Please subscribe to the Gifted Ed podcast to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Stay tuned for our next episode that continues to unpack the complexities of giftedness.